And joining me on the Broadcasters Podcast is Jared Easley. He's a genuine entrepreneur. I'm going through the bio here. He's been called the Zig Ziglar of the podcasting world. That's a Boogie Nights reference. If those of you, if you think we're all boomers who don't know what that is, go look the movie up. It's a good movie, okay? Mark Wahlberg, come on. Burt Reynolds, come on. I know that's a real boomer reference. Anyways, past couple of years, he started a podcast, written a book, and co-founded Podcast Movement, which is the world's largest international podcasting-only conference. He's a noticer, motivator, friend, and power content creator. I know you did a lot of the podcast, Jared, so I'm pretty sure you like the fact that bio gets read over and over again. So Jared Easley, co-founder and head of community content of Podcast Movement, thanks for joining me on the Broadcasters Podcast.
Jorge, this is long overdue, so I'm just grateful that you even thought of me. So I'm thrilled to be here.
The thing was, it just kind of was like, I mean, first of all, we are recording this in the middle of a confinement of the coronavirus. So the thing is, I have time. I need things to do. I cannot be stuck here at home and just twiddling my thumbs. I can't do Netflix and chill. I don't know how anybody does it. I want to be the person that's always creating content for things like that. I want to be the entertainer, not the entertained. I don't know why, but that's what I've always felt like. I like behind the scenes, behind the mic, behind the camera. That's my deal because I get more enjoyment out of that. Now, with you, go ahead, Jared.
I want to talk about that for a second. 2005, that's 15 years of podcasting. That is, for people that have podcasts, that's like super, super old school. Like you're the super OG podcaster. So I hope people appreciate that.
So just for those who know, before we got on the air, I made mention of the fact that I started in 2005 when podcasting wasn't even a name yet. And we were calling it audio archiving. And the iPod hadn't been invented yet. And it was fun. The thing was, I needed a release from radio. Because radio, corporate radio, I was not iHeart now, but it was Clear Channel back in the day, becomes iHeart. And I knew I was going to be there for long because the way the environment was, the morale, the people are so great behind the scenes. But man, management just, and listen, I'm going to talk about Bob Pittman a little bit. And I mean, listen, I don't hold back, but I don't discredit what he's done. But in his situation, I've always been contentious about what he could be doing better. But I'll talk about that in a little bit. But my thing is, when it comes to this right here, podcasting for me, it's like this is the new place now for opportunities to be done because digital media will get a rise in an unfortunate crisis. Very unfortunate. So let me go ahead and start off with an article from Out There, Colorado. They recently wrote this. Quote, with COVID-19 putting a bit more space between us than usual, you may be feeling a bit lonely. My recommendation is to pass the time. Podcasts, he says. Podcasts range from strictly educational to purely entertainment and everything in between, often feeling more like listening to an old friend than an aging recording. His first recommendation, this writer, says that you think of a topic that you enjoy and search for a podcast on that. With thousands available for free, you're bound to find something on nearly anything. Thanks for promoting That's a great PSC for podcasting. Yay. So, Jared, how do you look at the advantage that podcasting has now to this kind of a situation?
Well, even before the COVID-19 coronavirus quarantining and all that, podcast was just steadily growing, especially from a listening standpoint. So this last week, Edison Research put out the Infinite Dial 2020, and is a webinar. It's available for anybody to access. We can put that in the show notes there. But basically, it was talking about how in the U.S. population, then this is just U.S. people that they surveyed, 155 million people have listened to a podcast. And then in the last month, 37% have listened to a podcast. 24% of those have listened to a podcast in the last week. Of the ages between 12 and 34, 49% of those are monthly podcast listeners. And then weekly podcast listeners average about 6 podcasts per week. So that's even before all of this downtime that you're describing.
Well, let me go ahead and follow up on the Infinite Dial survey. So again, podcasts now listened to by over 100 million Americans a month.
Yep.
And it continues to head towards gender parity, increased use of smart speakers. The growth is in this for audio. And the thing is, people need to understand there's a reason why podcasting, when you're able to go, it's so portable, it's so easy. And, it's also, the way the model is for advertising for many stations or for many shows, it's so much different. It's just like, it's again, almost like a Kickstarter crowdfunding type model for most people, unless they get some kind of an advertising, but then you're an affiliate marketer, you make a little bit of revenue off of promoting somebody else's product, which is a great thing. And the research also shows that a third of Americans now, of all Americans, no longer have an AM FM radio. Oops. Looks like they only got in their cars. What do you think about the continued growth? Here's my question. I guess after all this time, have we seen a peak of the audience yet, or is there still room for growth?
Oh no, there's definitely still room for growth, and I think if anything, we just scratched the surface. Now, I believe as more people become, I'm still having conversations with people. I'm sure you do as well, Jorge. Where I talk to somebody, and I bring up podcasting, and it's becoming less and less where people are like, "What's a podcast?" I've noticed that over the last several years. Less people say what's a podcast, but people still say what's a podcast. So there's a lot of people that still don't even fully wrap their minds around what podcasting is, or that they can access it on their mobile device for free and have this abundance of content that you described earlier just at their fingertips. So I think it has a lot more room to grow, and maybe a situation like we're in right now, as unfortunate as it is, could be one of the catalysts for allowing more people to discover podcasts and more people getting into it, because they just didn't make the time in the past, where now they have a little more time and they're looking for things to fill it with.
Now, I think part of the thing, too, that also takes into account, and I think maybe, you let me know what you think about this. I think the technology has not caught up to the amount of content that's out there and making it very easable to find. The Apple Podcast obviously is the grail, because everything is up there. Everybody knows you need to put your podcast up there. But my thing is, I don't know if it's the best searchable. I don't know if it's the easiest to go ahead and navigate around. Spotify's jumped into the game very big time, and they've done a very good job with it. And iHeartRadio to another extent, but I think, nobody's gotten it really simple to make it easy to navigate. It has made the perfect podcast app to listen to podcasts on, or to be able to shuffle, or be able to have it perfect. I think there are good features on different products, like Google Podcast, for one. I actually really enjoy when they have the little silencing feature, where if you want to go and cut out gaps in between, that's not a bad thing. There's things where, it's there, but I just think that would be the other thing that would also help in the growth, is that we need to continue to see the updating of all the technology that plays these podcasts for us.
Yeah. And you're going to see that, or hey, there's no question, because the more people, the more money that podcasting makes in general, the more revenue that's coming in overall for podcasting is going to attract more people. People are going to see this, and they are going to be like, hey, we now understand these pain points that you're talking about, and there's going to be more innovation. But I mean, even now, we have more opportunity than we had even just a few years ago. So it's improved quite a bit. But yeah, we're not quite there yet in terms of all the neat features and the cool things that are needed, and that I believe will come in time. But it's still, light years ahead of where you started in 2005. I mean, just the fact that you can just go on your mobile device, and with an app, you can find almost anything that you're really wanting to find. I mean, that's pretty good.
So, I mean, when it comes down to it, the kind of podcasters are out there as well, I always think about the fact that, it is a different, there are basically a handful of styles that everybody likes to listen to their programs. Mm-hmm. And, the one thing I will say is I do like a lot of radio people that have found their way into podcasting, because a lot of good talent when they got let go and they just said, okay, well, I'm going to come to here. If it's a corporate radio model, they just, first of all, I could not stand where the corporate radio types, they said, well, podcasting is becoming a thing a couple of years ago. And I was like, okay, we need to do something about this. Well, let's just put our morning shows up there. We'll just put them in there with commercials and whatever. Maybe put somebody to listen to it. It's like, didn't take it seriously. I'll still go back. I used to listen to Don and Mike for a while. Used to be on Man Talk 640 AM here in in Palm Beach here in Florida. And I remember calling in because it was right after Anna Nicole Smith died. And I called into the show and I was like, I made a mention of something and they got upset because I said something about it. And then they're kind of asking me about like what I do. And I was like, I work in podcasting. And I just remember Don Geronimo saying, oh yeah, it was like the same thing as working in McDonald's. At that time, it was just like 2007, I think it was. So yeah, I got shit on for that. I like whatever. But at this point, I don't know if that guy's working anymore. And, I think he did do a podcast for a while. And it's like, see, look what you do. Like, you gotta, don't be so boomer about this. Like there is a boomer mentality. I love that word these days. It just works out. But for me, it's like, there's the NPR style, which does get a lot of promise. But then there's Joe Rogan, who's like, he just talks. Yep. There's no script. There's no nothing. He just talks, has a nice little set. It's depending on the guest. It's great. And it just makes it so simple.
You hit it right there. Depending on the guest. I really, really appreciate Joe Rogan's podcast, but I don't listen to every episode. No. And it's not because he's not great. He's great at what he does.
Oh yeah.
But it's if I'm interested in the guest, but some of the best podcast episodes I've listened to in the last year have been Joe Rogan's show.
Oh, so, the last one I heard was Bill Maher, and I was like, okay, ate it up for 2 hours. Like,
absolutely, perfect. Yeah. I will absolutely listen to that one. But then there's been other ones where I've started it, and it's like, as much as I respect Joe Rogan, he has to keep the lights on too. I mean, the guy's, Lord knows what he's making, but he reads ads for like the first several minutes of every show, and of course you and I don't mind that because we appreciate what he does, but. For someone that's new, they're like, in fact, I shared an episode that he did with Bob Lazar. That was a UFO one.
Oh, yeah. That's a coast guy right there. Oh.
Yeah, I shared that with a friend of mine. Her name's Christina. She does not listen to podcasts. She lives in the UK. She's in England.
Yeah.
And I shared that episode with her. And her first comment to me was, how long do I have to listen to these ads? And I kind of chuckled at that because I was like, I'm so numb to it. I don't even think about it. Hey, this is a good show. This is what they do. They read ads for a while because that's they're keeping their lights on or whatever.
Yeah.
But I thought that was kind of funny. Is like, that probably should be feedback for shows. Like, hey, find another way to do your ads. Because the new listener that doesn't know you or doesn't care, of course, he doesn't really have an interest in those people because he's got millions of others that do. So, but anyway, that's a lesson maybe for the newer podcast. Like,
but I think one thing for me,
creative with it.
Yeah, but for myself, I don't make a whole lot on this at all, and that's okay. Yeah. I mean, I do a little bit of things here and there, and if I'm going to plug something, I'll do mention kingofamazon.com. That's it's Amazon. You just go to it, but go through kingofamazon.com. That's all I'm going to plug. But I don't plug that too much. I leave it just towards like the beginning or whatever. But like,
you're smart for doing that. Some podcasters don't even know or think to do that, so that's good.
Well, those just trying to find a way to put a couple of cents together. But I mean, one thing is that mostly for podcasting, I also don't want to have the mindset that everybody has to come in here thinking, okay, yes, you can market your brand. Yes, you can market who you are, but you're not going to feel like you need to, like, this is like the end all be all of revenue. No, this is a supplemental income. If anything, to me, I mean, the celebrities are able to go and use their celebrity prowess to make something of it, or the brands that are out there that are doing the same thing. God bless you. But, for those that are out there, I would never want to discourage anybody from wanting to be in this, because the best part of podcasting is, honestly, anybody could do it. If you do a little reading up, you can get on here and do the same thing. That's what's great about this.
I agree. And I've been doing my podcast nowhere near as long as yours, but since 2013, which is now 7 years, and I'm proud of that. And I've not made money from my podcast. I've also realized early on that the gold for me, if you will, was the networking piece. I just really appreciated that. Like, you and I are chatting right now. You and I are friends. Prior to this interview, we've known each other from meetups and things in the South Florida area.
Last 3 years
for,
or so,
for several years. More longer than that, actually.
Probably,
but that is a testimony of the podcast space. I think is you and I have that relationship. We have that friendship. If you and I were to bump into each other, we'd be doing elbows, not handshakes right now, but we'd be doing elbows and we'd be hanging out and catching up, because we're consider ourselves friends. And that's just such an amazing testimony. I think the power of podcasting is the ability to really create genuine relationships. And I know for a fact that the stuff that we're doing now with the business that I'm in, we wouldn't be where we're at if it wasn't for that dynamic that's kind of unique to audio and specifically in podcasting.
Yeah. So now, as I mentioned before, you went on to the little tangent right there about the fact of the technology that podcast brings now. Apple Podcasts, Cult of Mac reports that they're making it easier for podcasts users to discover new shows focused on the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. The app's new coronavirus Stay Informed section now highlights content from CNN, NPR, BBC, and ABC News. Okay, that's fine that you have that, but I will just make this little side point. That's not the only places I go for content because, unfortunately, and I'll ask you about this. Because of the fact that we do have the mainstream brands that are trying to leverage podcasting, but the problem is that, we're seeing the polls. People have lost trust because there is no wall between news and opinion/editorial. The who, what, when, where, and why of journalism is basically dead. But I think there are still some good citizen journalists that have podcasts out there that I do listen to that are doing the right thing. When you look at that, what do you think about the fact that, obviously Apple, yes, put the brands out there. There might be some money they're making off of that. What do you think about the fact about where you go for information and, who's coming on board? Because anybody can bring you news that might not be credible.
Yeah. And because now more than ever, especially with what we're going through right now, it's important to to weigh that out. And I don't know that I have the best answer for that, but what I tend to do is I will check out a couple of shows and try to get an idea. Sometimes if it's relevant, I'll even do some independent research on my own to kind of fact check and double check. But yeah, for the most part, I try to, if I see a brand like I'll just throw out like like something like a Fox News or CNN or something like that.
Yep.
I'm probably going to be more likely to say, okay, that's probably somewhat credible. It might be, leaning in a certain political direction,
right.
But it's likely to be more credible than Tom's, daily news or whatever. I don't know Tom.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing out a name, but so for me, that's probably what I would start with doing. Is I would probably give the brands a chance just because they are a brand for a reason, and they have the name recognition. But I don't always depend solely on that. There's a lady out in California that does a really good daily news podcast. It's really short, kind of updates of the news, and it's called The Newsworthy. And I've been listening to that for a while now. And her name is Erica Mandy. And Erica is not massively famous. She's not like super big time podcast star, but she does a daily news podcast. She takes the latest news from the previous day and recaps it. And it's never, she's not spinning it in any particular direction. She's just saying what's going on. And so for that, I trust her because I guess I've just listened to her for so long, and if she's saying it, then I don't really go back and double check it. I just believe that she's curating this, and she's done it for so long now that I just listen to it and I believe it. And maybe shame on me, but she's not giving me a reason to mistrust her, I guess. But there's another podcast where it's called, well, you know what? I won't name the podcast, but it's a true crime podcast. And I really, really liked this particular true crime podcast. And I would listen to it. And then it came out last summer that one of the hosts, there's two, one of the hosts was plagiarizing other sources for the show. And when I found that out, I was, first of all, really disheartened.
Wow. Because
I thought, well, that's not cool. That's someone else's work. They should get, some kind of credit or, but then I thought about it too. I was like, I still like their show and I do listen to it on occasion, but now in the back of my head, I'm kind of like, okay, where did she get this info? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who'd she rip off for this? Which I hate feeling that way. It doesn't mean that I'm not still entertained by some of the content that they do or that I find it interesting or intriguing, as I do. And I haven't completely abandoned the show, but there is a little stigma with it. And it's because, she was discovered for plagiarism. So, you do what you can. You can't trust everybody, Jorge, as you know. But I think podcasting has enough people that have good intentions. And I think the ones that maybe are misusing that or purpose, their purpose is not with the best intentions. I think you're going to kind of figure that out over time, and then you can kind of make decisions based on that.
Yeah, the one I listen to now these days for news, I mean, wholeheartedly, Tim Pool. He's more or less, I guess you would say, left of center liberal. But the thing is, it's not even like so much of an objective, any kind of an opinion he has, but he tells a story, explains it quite a bit, and gives like proper context to everything. That's all he's about. But also, he's a big thumper against mainstream media because for me, it's like, I think people don't want the Ted Baxter type of news anymore. I don't think people placate to that. I think they just feel it's antiquated, it's contrived, and I just don't know if the people that are there. I mean, I just feel like clickbait is the game of the day. I don't feel like people, it's more for marketing, and like this is where the whole gamut comes in again, where it's like I'm not looking at it for the money, and that's some of the people I like that are doing that. Like, yes, find a way to go and keep my programming going so I can take care of the equipment I need and keep doing the content that I do so I can keep doing it. So, working almost like a paycheck to paycheck type system. I can appreciate people like that because they're doing the right thing for me and they're giving me good quality, informative content. I think that just does more for me than anything else. And that's where and I don't want to hamper on it. But the thing is, I was in journalism. I studied journalism, and I can't stand what we're getting to right now. I would be told, for me, it's totally fine to have a political opinion. Jesus Christ, that's fine. But, that shouldn't be so much a focus right now. And then the other thing, too, is I would prefer that we don't have to, that we could just have a good, clear identifying of what the news is, of who's out there. There's a reason the news was like it was for many years, and we respect so many different anchors and journalists and the type. And for me, I'll respect certain journalists that are good investigative reporters. It's something that's lacking right now, and that doesn't get done enough. When you talk about true crime, I think of what's that show from here they were doing? The one that's not Scandal. What's the name of it? Serial. See, that good investigative, I like that right there. And like that's the kind of thing, like when it's good, it's informative, explains everything. And I don't think there was any kind of a spin they were trying to make. I just think they told the story because it was a good story.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of thing I look forward to. The other one I was thinking from Spotify, I forget the name of it now, but there was one, Mogul, which is also a very good podcast. And I just happened to catch it because they talked about the Miami hip hops, the Two Live Crew and the whole story of free speech and censorship. Cool. Fantastic episodes there. That kind of stuff will get me. But across the board, I think it's also when they talk about, you find whatever genre of podcast you want, you take your pick. I just don't listen to a lot of the general stuff because I'm a big wrestling guy. I host my own wrestling podcast. And honestly, wrestling must encompass at least about 20% of all podcasts. I cannot believe how many people are out there doing it. Lots of fans. And I love the interaction. I like people doing it. But, it's like, I just want more podcasters out there to be themselves. Don't create some kind of a thing like you got to act like you got to have some kind of an inflection or whatever you're doing. Just talk. That's all I want to do. Just talk. We like different voices here. That's the whole point.
I'm curious what you think about wrestling in the sense of them doing shows now. When I say them, I'm talking about like the WWE or AEW. They're doing shows basically with no fans. Because they have these contracts, these TV contracts and stuff, or they're putting out pay-per-views or whatever. And there's no fans that can come to the arenas because of, the coronavirus. But, they're still trying their best to put that out there. Do you find that entertaining? What's your
Absolutely. I'll tell you, you must be a wrestling fan. You called out both companies that are very important. I watch a lot of different wrestling, different organizations. What has happened in the last 2 weeks with WWE and AEW doing programming like they have. Listen, they're trying to fulfill the sports component that people are missing. I give them credit. First of all, Vince McMahon is a stubborn mule. It doesn't matter. He's going to try to keep making the money coming in. He's losing money in the XFL because he had to suspend the season. For him, they had the facilities. Here's the thing. Because they're sports franchises or they're sports entertainment companies that have their own venues where they can continue shooting content. So as they can do that, they can make sure they can properly screen the wrestlers. They're able to do what they need to do. That's fine. WWE has not done a great job of doing the live with no audience component. I think AEW this past week with their Dynamite show did a fantastic job. I think, it's the ambiance, it's the way you do things in the background. You have a lot of things going on. And I would wish the problem is WWE is making so much money right now. They have to serve at the behest of their broadcast partners. They're making $250 million a year off of USA and Fox Television. They have to fill those contracts. Yeah. Like they can't go back and put out archive content at the moment. They have to do what they have to do, and it's proof positive because the ratings are up for all those shows. Because they need something else that's live and interesting content. And if they can keep going without getting shut down, might as well. I mean, WWE has their performance center. It's their venue. They have all the production on site. They can do a good show. They produce a great show every week. Their content's not great, and they need to work on that. And they're going to keep WrestleMania going. They're going to do it over 2 nights. They're going to keep trying to go chugging along, and I can't blame them for that. If they could keep making money, God bless them. Do what you got to do. And that's fine. What else is there that gives that kind of, competitive component? I mean, does everybody want to watch movies or sad news all day? Like if there's other escapes of anything, we might as well. And honestly, I like the fact I talk about it every week where I could talk about what they're doing. And honestly, I set it up on my podcast this past Wednesday. I'm grading it on a curve. Listen, they're under inordinate circumstances. I'm glad they're doing what they're doing. I'm grateful they're doing what they're doing. That's where I'm coming from.
Well, I am not as big of a wrestling fan as you, but I do appreciate it. And I did see, Dynamite that you were talking about and how they introduced Matt Hardy at the end, even without an audience, was very compelling. And it's really creative. And you're right. I hope WWE can kind of take notes because I think AEW is kind of doing it a little bit better. Plus, they had some, staff or other wrestlers that were in the vicinity of the ring, so it didn't feel as empty as you're seeing in a WWE pay-per-view. So.
Right, and the thing was, it's a little inside baseball. So that they introduced a couple new characters into their product, and the fact that you have certain characters that you had the bad guys on one side of the arena and the good guys on the other side. The bad guys are betting on matches and talking crap, and they just did a better job of entertaining. Where you're completely distracted from the fact there's no audience, no crowd reactions of anything. They just did a better job, is what they did. They just know what they're doing better because it's just fresh minds doing better stuff. But again, it's where podcasting is a great dynamic. Let's get back to that. Podcasting is the same way. There's the way you do it where WWE does things and the way that AEW does it. It's grassroots versus corporate. And, you can work in both ways, but there has to be some creativity that goes into like an NPR style show or a show that iHeartRadio does, Ron Burgundy, whatever it is. Okay, you can do shows where, all right, you're just making up something. Let's just take the Anchorman role. We'll just roll it out into a show. Yeah, you got 1 million people listening to it. Good for you. But yeah, you're just doing that. And, Will Ferrell does the voice. Okay. It's like, if it works for you, I don't think it's very creative myself, but hey, God bless him for doing it.
I've listened to some Ron Burgundy. I've been entertained. I think I like the Conan Needs a Friend show a little bit better. That makes me laugh more. But I think it's interesting to see people that are Hollywood celebrities and getting into podcasting and finding that they really enjoy it and that it is something that was a quote Conan said recently, as recent as I believe February. He said that some of his most meaningful work has been recently in this podcast. It's like he looks back on his career and some of the most meaningful stuff he's found in doing the podcast. And I think that's wow. Why is that?
Wow.
That's an interesting thing for someone of his status to say. And he's not the only one that's made comments like that. So I think, that's a testimony of podcasting. There's more opportunity there. You're likely going to see more people like those names jumping in and now all of a sudden the cool kids are doing it, so it's okay.
When it's not contrived and it's stripped down, like a Conan, he has no problem stripping himself down and making himself like. I'll tell you, for him, I remember when he was leaving NBC to go to TBS, and just the way he was, it just didn't give a shit. And just it was funnier that way. I think when he's not having to go and play to the bosses, he can just play like he wants to play. I think he's great. I think he's very funny. And
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I'm wondering what he's going to do. I read he's coming back on March 30th to do new shows. He's going to do it from home and everything's going to be remote. I'm going to probably tune in to find out how that is because I'm curious how he does that. That's pretty creative. At least the guy's daring to do it. I saw Andy Cohen's going to come back and do his show and like, hey man, God bless him. Do it. Let's.
Yeah.
I'm curious what the programming comes up, how creative we get. Because honestly, podcasting is just another section of how entertainment and how we watch television and listen to radio or listen to audio, it's going to change because of this. We know society's going to change as a result. I think our viewing and listening habits are absolutely going to change because of this.
Like you and I right now, we're recording this podcast, but I'm in my house. You're in your house. We're using a tool called Zoom to record this. And how cool is that we're in that era of technology where we can just make a podcast sitting in it, each other's. I'm in my house, you're in your house. So and you could be interviewing someone across the world and doing the same thing.
Absolutely. Oh no, I love
incredible.
It's been so great. No, on this show, I've gotten people talk to people from different areas, different walks of life. It's just nice to do, and honestly, makes it easier. You don't have to get set up with makeup. You don't have to go get on a set. You just wherever you are, wherever you want to do it. I mean, it's just gotten so easy. Now, okay, so let's move along here. I'm not, I'm going to focus. I'll get off the COVID-19 stuff because, I got another question about that. I'll just make a point about this, but they're talking about that. There are a lot of different coronavirus focused series that have also emerged. Yeah. And, you got CNN's Coronavirus, Fact versus Fiction, Ride Home Media's Coronavirus Daily Briefing, charting well in Apple Podcasts. And so, it's really great about that. And also, Google Trends shows us the demand for podcasts about coronavirus. It's gotten a sharp rise in coronavirus-related episodes, showing podcasters' response to that demand. So there you go. Now, another thing I want to ask about is, you have also, not only with the Podcasters Meetup and, doing a lot of work for Podcasters Movement, there's also the community aspect. Because what you're doing with Podcasters Movement, it was an increase of what you're doing when you did a podcasters meetup here in South Florida. The fact of the matter is you were bringing people together and there was an online community that would know, okay, we're going to engage at this venue on this day every month. Or if not, you had people that were encouraging to learn more about their podcast. What are you doing with your podcast? And really creating a great community. And now you spoke back in 2015 about Facebook groups and how to nurture a community on Facebook. So now we're in this age of coronavirus and confinement. I've been reading now stories about everything from, new Facebook groups to a lot more social media engagement with people that might not even know each other or just friends to keep in touch. Online dating is completely changing now. So people are doing much more virtual dating than ever. The question is, do you see any avenues in this coronavirus confinement where online communities are going to be much more prominent? Do you think we're going to see a lot more communities really engaged and very active?
Yeah, I think everything you've just said points to that, and we're seeing the same thing. We have a Facebook group that has just grown organically, very rapidly over just a few years, and it's now over 31,000 members of people that are interested in podcasting or that podcast. And yeah, we kind of chuckle about it now because when we first started this thing, we thought, wouldn't it be amazing to have a group with 2,000 members? And now you fast forward to where we are, and somebody will come in and ask a simple question like, if I want to record a podcast remotely, like we're doing with a guest, what are the best tools to do that? And they'll potentially get 100+ answers of people saying, well, here's what I use, and here's how I do it. So it's become like this really, like you said, community. It's a great place. It's a safe place for people to come in and ask questions or share their opinion on things. And that's how I think podcasting overall begins to be more innovative and more creative is one of the last podcast movements we did was in Orlando. That was last 2019 in the summer. And one of the ladies that I talked to has a podcast about bird watching. And it kind of cracks me up. I asked her, what was one of the sessions that you went to where you found, something that was really helpful to you? And her answer made me laugh. She's like, "Oh, the without a question, the podcast, the session that I went to that I learned the most from was from the wrestling guys." and not to get back onto wrestling, but and that kind of made me laugh. It's like, well, how many places are you finding the bird watching lady connecting with the wrestler guys and learning from each other? Like that just probably isn't happening that often in other spaces, but in podcasting that's becoming true is people that are in completely different niches and different categories are saying, well, how is this person doing it? And what is this? What is successful? What kind of formula does this show have that builds that community, that creates more interest from listeners? And they're learning from each other. And it's, it's, just like you said, it's creating more community because people are saying this is a good place to be. This is a collaborative spirit. It's a synergistic opportunity. And when they feel that and they sense that, they're diving in and they're learning and they're getting better and they're becoming. I would think the learning curve is getting smaller. Is probably a good way to say it. People are getting answers from a lot of different opinions and then being able to hopefully implement that into their own show. And so that is what we're seeing in our community. We're seeing just a lot more people interacting. Our engagement on other social media channels like Twitter and Instagram is amazing. Just on LinkedIn, I have a habit of just sharing kind of some of the most recent podcasting articles and things that have come out about podcasting. And my personal engagement for my LinkedIn, which I've never really put too much time into, has probably tripled, in the last couple of months. Just because people are interested in podcasting, and I'm not doing anything other than just sharing. Okay, here's an article that somebody wrote why Spotify is doing it this way, or here's an article about marketing your podcast, and I share things like that, and then people are commenting, people are engaging with me, and I that wasn't even happening, several months ago. I would just post something, I might get a couple of likes, no big deal, and I didn't really care because it was LinkedIn. I don't really focus too heavily on LinkedIn, but I am now because there's a lot more people that are interested. So it is. I think without a doubt, people are wanting community. They're wanting to find people they trust. They want to find people they can learn from, and especially if they're in the podcasting space and they can continue to be innovative. And that's one of the best ways to be innovative is to get ideas and kind of make them your own. By learning from other people that have done it longer than you, such as Jorge.
Thank you. Thank you very much. But I'll tell you one thing. It was really hard at the beginning for me to, getting back to the groups, there's something to be said about, yes, the wrestling community, the gaming community, the people that are really into, genre movies or anime. It's the younger millennials or, maybe late Gen Zers, the older Gen Zers that are really engaged into the space. I mean, for me, I can't tell you how many people on YouTube, especially, I listen to that are really just caught, or they're just younger than I am, way younger, but their content's so good and the way they present themselves just haven't moved themselves to podcast yet. Or they do a podcast version of what they do, and they also do a video. And I just figured, I'll do that as well. I've started doing some video stuff, not all of it, just like I still have my podcaster sit alone. But then I have one I call When I'm Not Podcasting, and that's just an umbrella so that if there's certain things I want to talk about that's outside of my normal content, and do that. But I also want to learn from other people. And, there's Reddit you could go to, there's Twitter, there's a lot of spots where you could just go and follow different things. I just don't know where we're going to go there. And I'm wondering what's going to be more engaging to others than anything else. And that's really what I want to find out. I'm going to talk with Jared Easley. He's, again, the co-founder and head of community and content for the Podcast Movement. I want to ask about that and get into the conference stuff with you, Jared. So Podcast Movement is slated currently to be in Dallas, Texas, August 5th through August 8th. At the moment, can you tell me, is the status of the event still active? Are you still taking registrations? What's the status of the show?
Yes, we are still taking registrations and have every intention of following through and successfully doing the event, assuming it's safe to do so. We're definitely paying attention to all the things that are going on, and in close communication with the venue and with the city of Dallas. And our main office is actually in Dallas, Texas, so we have kind of boots on the ground and keeping abreast of everything that's going on locally. And so, hopefully things are better in a few months and we're in a position to continue and do the event. However, no one can see the future. And if that's not the case, we will absolutely cancel, assuming, that it's not safe to have the event. We will cancel and refund anyone that's purchased tickets and And that's a hit to the business. And we just already, kind of had a number of meetings and discussions on what that'll be like, and what adjustments are necessary if we have to make that decision. And I think we would certainly survive it, but it would, certainly, our biggest form of revenue for the year is through that event. And so
I would hope that it's going to be okay, because I think the fact of the matter is with this the coronavirus. First of all, you're going to be doing it in August. It's going to be the hot, dead summer right there. I would imagine flu season will be done, obviously, by that point. And I think, you might, I would also think that, if trying to go ahead and continue things, I think for anybody that's trying to do any kind of events, probably going into June or July, probably a better chance of making it happen. So, I mean, I agree with you that, continue to monitor, but I think there's a chance that you can still go. I mean, for us, one of the events that we do with my full time at Cannabis Radio is the United States Cannabis Conference and Expo. And unfortunately, that's why I never got to go to podcast. But it's always around the same weekend as you guys, so I won't get a chance to go. But I think at the moment we're still locked in to do our event as well. But we are doing virtual now. Has there been any thoughts? Have you looked into any ideas where virtual might be an option? Just, to see if that would be something that people might be interested in. Obviously, being in the podcasting environment, it could be.
If we cancel the in-person event, we will end up doing something that is virtual. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but I will say this. In the past, this was probably 2014, we did a virtual summit, which is like a conference, but just virtual. And we tested that out, and we've done it before. So it wouldn't be our first rodeo. I'll put it that way. We've not made it an annual event. We just did it a one-time thing. And we decided at that point, our audience wasn't quite big enough to kind of see the benefits that we were looking for or wanting to achieve at that time. Now, that being said, if we cancel the event and it's not safe to do it, we would put together something virtually, and I'm sure it would still be good. But there's nothing quite like that in person. And of course, safety's the primary thing. So assuming that is the case, and people are better, and it's okay to travel, and it's not a problem, then we intend to move forward, and hopefully people can come, and it'll still be a good experience.
Yeah.
And so we're optimistic because it is still several months away, but at the same time we're not naive either. So we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But we're in the meantime, we are taking registrations, and I'm writing a newsletter tomorrow, and in that newsletter I'm going to talk about one of the contingency promos that we're doing for people that are on the fence. So.
And if people want to be a part of that, and also want to go and register, and everything will cross our fingers, everything will be good. Podcastmovement.com. Make sure to go like that. Now, I want to talk about one of your previous shows. Back in February, you had the Podcast Movement Evolutions Conference in Los Angeles.
Yes.
So I mentioned, so I have talked extensively about the iHeartMedia CEO, Bob Pittman. Look, I'm not going to go into a long diatribe because, listen, I mean, I have my bones to pick with him, but that's just because of the fact that, listen, and I'll just say it real quick. I don't like the fact that this guy has taken this company, and I'm not saying it's just completely him, but this is a company that's owned under private equity for a number of years. The Mays family dumped it off. They grew this so big, and radio at the time, they just bought all these stations. I think they just paid way too much for what they did. They decided to go and corporatize and really micromanage everything. And Bob Pittman, under his leadership, has done that continuously across. Now, to his credit, the iHeartRadio app has been very successful. They have a great product in that. Their features in terms of their music, their podcasting has been great. I just think that, they haven't done great with the radio content, the terrestrial radio content, trying to create different pipelines of revenue. It's more of making money than it is creating great content. But, Bob was, if I'm correct, he was in a keynote conversation at the conference, or I know he spoke there. He said this, quote, "I think the sky is the limit for podcasting. Quote, as an industry, we need to keep investing in it so it can reach its full potential." So now, what do you think about the corporate influence of podcasting in the space? Because for me, the investment is fine. We'll take the money, but don't control the content and don't make something that people don't want to listen to.
Yeah, I think that's one of the beautiful things about podcasting is I don't see this changing ever, but podcasting, as you've already put it, is available for anyone to do, and there is no red tape. You can create a podcast and you can put it out there, and because of that, it's wonderful to see someone like iHeart be jumping in and being so serious and proactive about podcasting, because if anything, that just brings more visibility to the media, to the form of media and podcasting. So for me, I do understand where you're coming from, but I have hope, just as I think every other podcaster should have hope, is just because a particular identity or organization is getting involved doesn't mean that they control the whole thing. They might control various aspects if you're on their app, for example, or if your show is being distributed, through them. But other than that, podcasting is still, anyone's opportunity. And because of that, no one controls what you say or what you do or when you do it. And my personal podcast, I had not put out an episode since December, just because I got busy, and then everything happened. But then I put out an episode, in March, and that's completely okay in podcasting. There's no one to frown on you. I mean, there's the argument, okay, if you're not consistent, that could be a bad thing. But podcasting is freedom. It allows you to put something out if you want to or not, and so. I love that about podcasting, and I've given myself that full freedom. Okay, if I don't put out a show every week, that's all right. I'm going to try my best and do it when I can, but if I can't, I'm not going to beat myself up or feel like I'm a bad podcaster. I'll continue to put out shows as I can do it, and I love it, and that's why I do it.
Yeah. Now, okay, so I will say this. There are certain people that have come from the corporate world that have done pretty well, not exceptionally well, I'll say, in the space. Norm Pattis, coming from Westwood One to create podcasts. Well, I like what he's done. I can't knock for what he's done that. And when I think about NPR coming into the space, they've done good content. Obviously, people listen to it a lot. And I think for NPR, what they learned about this is that's whatever happens to their funding or the donations they get for member support, I think podcasting is where they can thrive. Honestly, I think that's where people, I think, are listening to their content. They put out a good app. They're just doing a better job there. I don't think they need all these towers and all these frequencies. I think if they want to just go to a podcast model, you could definitely do that, and then just create your news division into something else, and just find a way to get to that. I just think that they're serving better in that space than they would with PBS on television or with NPR on traditional radio. I think for me, because then what you could do is terrestrial radio can then be opened up to more local broadcasters. And then just like podcasting, that local grassroots field can grow, because if people have the money and the wherewithal to buy a station and put whatever content they think would be for the community, then let the airwaves go back to the public. Podcasting should be in the same way in the public interest, and people shouldn't be able to have the opportunity to do that. So I'm always a little bit fearful when I see certain people in the space. I'm not knocking Bob Pittman as integrity. Listen, this is the guy that was instrumental for MTV, and he's done a lot of good work in his time. But it's just that in this role, I've been contentious about it. I have been very vocal about it. I'll just say that. Sure. That's where I'm coming from. Now, at the NAB show last August, I also railed about this. I put a video up on about when I'm not podcasting, youtube.com/jbrasco951, JBRASCO951. He said this, and this got me off to another level. He said podcasting is radio's birthright. Okay, Bob. All right. You pissed me off something. I was scorched earth when I heard that. I'm like, you do not come into this space and say that you're coming in because you think radio knows. No. There are great radio people that know what they're doing in podcasting. That's the truth. And I commend those people coming into the space and learning and being able to adjust into the space and, taking their ego and taking their reputation at the door and checking it and saying, okay, this is a new space. I need to do better for my audience and really put out great content. Okay, good. But he said this as well, quote, TV made a terrible mistake, Netflix. They let that model become another business they did not own. For radio, that's podcasting. Yes, it's a disruptive model, correct. You're absolutely right. In podcasting, quote, it's not about the content, it's about the host. Well, I'm probably going to disagree. I think it's the content and the host that make the both. Back to him. He says, like radio, it's a companionship. All of us should be doing podcasts, big or small. It is a gateway to advertisers. So I'm going to step out of it. What do you think about his statement and his comments?
Well, with great respect to Mr. Pittman, I don't necessarily. If radio people, broadcast backgrounds, want to say that podcasting is a broadcast birthright, that's their opinion. I don't agree with it.
Right.
And they don't. At the end of the day, they don't control it. They can control pieces of it, but they can't control it overall. And for someone like yourself, to have any kind of concern about that, I would say you don't have to have concern, because you own your show, you own your feed, you have the ability to market it and to promote it, and they don't have any say so in any of that. So unless you're promoting it through their their app or whatever. So I kind of understand where he's coming from, and but at the same time, that for the independent person like myself and I don't really see it as a negative. I see it as more visibility to podcasting in general when these bigger organizations and these bigger identities are involved. And I think overall that's probably and likely good for podcasting. But I don't see anyone that can just step in and say, okay, Jorge, you can no longer do your show unless you abide by ABC. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think it's democratized. We can do it unless, God forbid, our great nation of ours is no longer free for some reason. I think then you could potentially podcast in another country, but you can podcast. You're gonna be able to podcast, and you're gonna be able to talk about what you want, and no one's gonna be able to tell you otherwise. And I don't really see that changing. I'm hoping that never changes, but I don't believe it will. So I hear your frustration when people make those types of claims and those types of comments, and whether I agree with them or not is I still think that podcasting is going to benefit from these different identities and these organizations that are getting involved, and that will ultimately be to the benefit of the podcaster who is being creative, who is being innovative, and who is listening to their audience, and who is being community minded, and all those things. That they'll see opportunities and they'll have growth because of those things. And various identities, like you named, like Backheart, they won't have any control over that.
And don't get me wrong, I appreciate, and for me, I'm really trying to instill a certain philosophy: be more constructive, less critical. So with my criticism, I have been constructive in saying, I mean, first of all, iHeartMedia has all the greatest top 40 radio stations in the country, almost all of them. They control the market there. They control the market on different music formats. And if you wanted to nationalize those formats and get your music radio content with lower loads of ad inventory, I think there's a way to go and make that where people would be a little more ingesting the product. You could do that and put the best people out there to go and host shows, and then you create time for local content. I mean, they do that over in the overseas. I mean, we see what BBC does. They do great content and podcasts as well. And that's a government-owned entity. CBC the same way. They know what they're doing. We don't get that over here. So I can understand if you have you want to take you want to take a good portion of the market share, go right ahead. Hey, I'm all about capitalism and I'm all about free market. Podcasting should be the same way, but everybody gets a chance to get a piece of the pie. Everybody gets a chance. For me, I just think you could be doing more, instead of just trying to jump into podcasting or just trying to get your content out there through a digital device. How about working on the models that actually have been around for almost a century? Work on that. My God, I wish I had the time to go and work on the models here. And I think you could do it. Well, even if you're micromanaging. Okay, so you can't have people at every station. You can't afford the staff or the overhead. But there's a thing you could do where, okay, the open studio rule, the FCC, they cut that rule down, the main studio rule. That's been gone. Okay, so then consolidate. Make everything a syndicated format. Everybody runs, and there's certain stations that'll be able to run whatever it is. And yeah, if you don't want to go local, then just be honest about that. And then there are other stations you could unload and sell and let those people be the arbiters of local content. Like, I would rather have that kind of world than them just saying, okay, it's our birthright to come into this space and just do what we want. No, you get to be a part of the greatness of podcasting, but you're not going to control it, and you're not going to be overtaking it.
Can I share a couple stories with you, like of people that are really doing awesome stuff, and
Sure.
they're not in those big circles. One guy that comes to mind is a guy in Orlando or outside of Orlando. His name's Brian, and his family has a business that's HVAC, air conditioning, and all that.
Mm-hmm.
And he started a podcast about something that I would never be interested in, but it's about training for people in that specific space, and things like repair, whatever, just and an audio podcast talking about those things. And he wasn't sure if he'd have 10 listeners or no listeners or even more. And what happened was he just focused on being, as you've said, being real strategic with the content and the training, and he organically attracted people that were interested in that space or that work in that space. And it got to a point in a short amount of time, I mean, we're talking maybe a little over a year, where different companies that are trying to market to that specific community were buying ads on his podcast because there really was nowhere else for them to buy ads.
Yeah.
There was limited opportunity for them to get in front of that audience. And so, the last time I talked to him was several months ago, but he had said that in the last year he made just 6 figures in ad revenue on doing that specific type of podcast, and it's created all these new opportunities. And it to me, that's a testimonial of being niche, of being very specific, and finding an audience. And not, he didn't have to have any help from iHeart or any of these other bigger people. He just said, okay, this is what I do. This is the target. And so now he starts creating the show, and the word got out organically. Hey, check this out, and now that audience and that community is there, and they're not only enjoying that podcast, but his family business now gets some of the best hires from throughout the country. People want to relocate to Orlando to work for this business.
Wow.
Because of this podcast, and we can chuckle at that and laugh at that, but that's another example of how something like podcasting is so powerful. It creates this relationship. It creates this connection. And my friend, Donald Kelly, he started out as an inside sales rep for a corporation, and just started reading all these books and learning all these things about sales. And eventually he broke away because he started a podcast, and he would just interview people that had a lot of experience in sales that would give advice for people that were new. And now he's created his own business that is sales training oriented. And so his podcast, although that didn't make all the money, he's had ads and different things on his podcast, but it created an opportunity for him to create a business model around sales training. And so now he does that full time. He doesn't work for this corporation anymore. He does that full time. And he might not be making $1 million or whatever, but he's doing a full time business that takes care of him and his wife and his son from the sales training things and the various things that they offer, products, services, whatever, that are marketed through this podcast. And that happened because of the podcast. And there's lots more examples of that. I could talk another long. I could go long-winded about these.
I bet. You should write a book about it. As a matter of fact.
Yeah,
oh, there you go.
It's pretty incredible, and it's not limited to just the middle-aged white male. It can be it's diverse. It's women. It's people of all ethnicities. It's all languages. More and more Spanish-speaking podcasts.
Back to the days of the South Florida Podcasters Meetup, you had a very diverse group of podcasters from.
That was so cool to see.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I loved it. It was, and honestly, what a great community to put that together. And I can only imagine what you get a podcast movement on a regular basis. But there you go. Now let me go and obviously, besides podcast movement, you're doing your podcast called Starve the Doubts, which you mentioned. I'll just make mention of what the show's about. You're interviewing individuals who have starved the doubts, moved into self-confidence, making their dreams, businesses, and passion a reality. So you said that show's coming back up. You've already started putting out new content?
Yeah, I had the last episode I'd put out before this recent one was end of December of last year, and then I got a little busy and I just didn't put one out. But
during the holidays, that's when you start packing up content. You can be. I'm just saying, I do this for a living. Evergreen content, my friend.
Yeah, I know. I'm in agreement with you 100%. I have my family and I have the business, the podcast movement business, and sometimes that takes it over. But I've given myself that that freedom to say it's okay.
Yeah. And I get it
because mentally I can do that now. I can put out a show, and it's March. Where was I? January and February. But I put out a show, and I'm going to continue to put out shows, and I'm not going to ever stop my podcast. I'm going to continue doing it. I might have gaps and breaks, but I'm still going to do it because I love it.
Yeah.
So it's fun, and I hear from people. I got an email back probably in January where a guy was like, I went on an 8-hour road trip, and I listened to your podcast, the entire way, and I immediately thought, I can't even get my wife to listen to me for 8 minutes, much less 8 hours. Like, you're crazy. But of course I didn't say that to him. But I just thought that was funny. Like, there are people that listen, and I'm becoming connected with people in Uganda and Singapore and in different places that find the show, and they listen to it and they enjoy it, and then they learn about the people and the guests that I have on the show. And I've gotten emails from guests and be like, hey, I want you to know, because I was on your podcast, I connected with Stacy, and now Stacy's a client, or Stacy's
that's great.
And so I hear those things, and I think, okay, well, this is still relevant. This is still useful. It might not be thousands upon thousands of people that are listening, but that's okay. I mean, I like doing it. I want to do it.
And that's the whole point. It's a passion. For you, I see you've written a couple of books. I want to just point out a couple: Podcasting Good to Great, How to Grow to Your Audience Through Collaboration. The other book is those other books you have. I saw there's a handful of them, but I wanted to point out too. And Stop Chasing Influencers, The True Path to Building Your Business and Living Your Dream. So I want to ask you about that second book. What is it about the fact that, I see influencers all the time. Well, it's more of something where they always use that word for Instagram people. But I also hear about the same, where you're seeing the same thing in marketing when it comes to video content, or there might be some others that are out there that is that idea. But give me a try without. I know we're going to have to send people to the book, but how do you basically kind of point out the fact that people shouldn't be looking to your peers, the people that you look at as role models of what you're doing in this space? Even if it is podcasting, why is it you just follow your own path?
Well, there's a difference in kind of examining different models of what works, and seeing what people do is different from just proactively trying to buy all their services and products to get on their radar to see if they can help you grow. I think that is something that is common, especially in the business and marketing world, as you'll see these faces, these gurus that have these products and services that are supposed to help your business if you're an independent business owner, and really you're building their dream, you're not building your own. So that book was really intended to say, okay, instead of taking resources and focusing heavily on some of these people that are so high up the mountain they forgot what it's like to be where you are, take those resources and put that into your idea, your thing, work on you. I don't think it's wrong to get examples and get ideas from people that are further up the mountain. I think that's completely fine. But I think when you're wasting all your time, your resources trying to get on someone's radar, or trying to invest in somebody because you think they're going to somehow reciprocate in some way, I think that's not really going to help you move the needle. So that's why that book was written. And there's a lot of relevant stuff in that book that if people read it, they'll get really good ideas and actionable tips on how they can grow their own influence. And I think that was the whole purpose. There's a contrarian title, but the purpose is really about what can you do, and here's some things that laid out in detail on things and ideas that you can do to implement and grow your own influence. And that was important, and it still is, and so that was the purpose of that book.
So is there a website where we can find all of where everything you're working on, or are there any particular social media handles that we should follow along with what you're doing?
I think for now, I point people to Podcast Movement just because I'm so passionate about it and I love it, and we've been doing it since 2014, and it started as a crowdfunding opportunity. That's how Podcast Movement got started. We did a Kickstarter. And so now every year we've had events that, we get the hobbyists, the person that's doing it in their garage, and then we get the people that are working for Spotify and Apple. We get all types.
Oh, you get major companies. I can't believe
major companies that,
shows.
the major companies are represented. And that's I think a huge benefit is when you can walk into a conference and you could actually go meet these people and get on their radar. There's been a lot of success that's come from that. People that have been featured on Apple and different things because they met them at the conference. They got to know them. And those people are pretty gracious. They may seem like they're too far out of reach, but they're not at the conference. They're right there. And so, won't get too heavy on that, but I say podcastmovement.com. And then I'm pretty active now on LinkedIn. So if people want to look me up, Jared Easley on LinkedIn, I'd love to connect with you there. And more of the posts that I'm doing on LinkedIn is just about, podcasting industry stuff. It's anyone that's podcasting would likely find most of the articles interesting that I post on LinkedIn or that I'm sharing over there. I'm not actually writing the articles. I'm just curating stuff and sharing it. But I really enjoy connecting with people now on LinkedIn. It's something that I've actually spent a lot more time doing, and I enjoy it. So,
you get a lot of major speakers. Obviously the Todd Crocker's of the world, the Rob Greenlees, the Daniel G. Lewis's, the Dave Jacksons, all those types that are just real industry types in the space. And obviously all these different companies that are coming across, whether it's Libsyn or Spotify or Spreaker or what have you, they're all coming to the show. So obviously you have the big major show. And how many people do you usually show these shows every year now?
Well, we before the coronavirus, we were anticipating probably 3,000 for this Dallas event. That may or may not be true now, but for the first time we did Evolutions, the first time event, we had over 1,200 registered, and we were hoping for maybe 700. So I was really happy with that. But the event we had in Orlando was probably around 2,800.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's definitely an exciting thing, and when it's safe and we can do the event and you can check it out, I hope that people will. It's great.
One of the few industries that's actually still monetizing and making money in this unfortunate time. Hopefully all of us are hunkering down, listening to podcasts and enjoying ourselves, because Netflix is only going to give us so much. I'm just saying.
I don't think it's Netflix, but yeah.
Yeah. For me, let me go and get my Amazon tap, head to the pool, throw on a podcast or whatever. What I get to enjoy is what I look forward to. Jared Easley, co-founder and head of community and content of Podcast Movement. Hey, thanks for joining me here on the show, man. I really appreciate your time. And we had the time, I guess, obviously. What else are we going to do at this moment? I'm going to wait to hear this in a couple of months and say, okay, it was good to be able to do this at this time and, pass the word along. So thanks for making time, my friend.
I appreciate it, Jorge, and I hope when things are safe again, you and I can grab lunch and have a beverage and just catch up, because we live so close. It's a shame not to hang out. So
I agree with that. Let's do that soon.
All right, my friend. Thank you again.